All right, all right, all right. Everybody, how's everybody doing today? And for you guys who are going to be tuning in, thank you for tuning in for another episode of Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. And as always, thank you guys for your support. And if you guys get your pens and your paper ready, man, we have another amazing guest. You already know how we do it, man. Uh, Man, we just go jump into it, brother. We just go jump into it. And I apologize for you guys who've been waiting for me to jump on. I've been running a little late this morning. Traffic was a mother. So yeah, without further ado, we're going to introduce our guest, and you guys get your pens and paper ready because we about to bring it, man. All right.
Thank you, Tony.
You're
And
welcome.
it's an honor and a delight to be with you here today. Thank you so much. And it is an honor and a delight to be with your audience as well. And so thank you so much. I am Dr. Birgitte Tan, and I am a grief specialist or a grief coach with a background in veterinarian oncology and as well as a trauma response practitioners and also training life coaching.
Well, thank you for being on today. And yeah, so before we get started, tell people where you're from.
I am at this moment, I reside in California and Nevada. And in case somebody is curious about my accents originally is from the land where palm tree dance or Indonesia.
Wow, that is amazing. Well, thank you for being on the show today. And so yeah, let's. I want to start off. Tell people about the work that you do, because I know you're a veterinarian as well, right? But you're also a grief specialist. So I mean, tell people how you got into this work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And so how I got into it is actually even before the veterinarian or anything, it's a lot of it is from my life experience. Uh, as I experienced grief since I was 5 years old, a multitude of different things, and so over the years, I said, you know what, there is a way for me to live a better life. And as we know, back in the day, I think we didn't really know, but nowadays we know that grief, all in addition to emotional impact, which many times we feel, and also even mental health, but also nowadays we know that grief has a lot of physical impact. And so with me it was I have a multitude of maladies emotionally and mental health, as well as my physically and mental health wise, my uh, uh, my medical record look like an encyclopedia.
Yeah,
they
that's what you were saying.
that they get a binder for my medical record, which is not a thing to happen to anybody. It's not something I
Right.
want. So I keep searching on what is it that I am able to do, and I'm already. Please, by all means, my background is medicine as well, and doctors definitely are great. This is not to say don't go to doctors, but they've done the very best they can. Something just still missing, and with the contingent of psychiatrists and therapists, something's still missing. So I keep searching and I keep learning for myself to help myself really, and so that is when the grief work. And as I learn something, I help others. I learn something, I help others. So I've been helping people as along as every time I learn something, and it's like, okay, this work to a degree, and to a good degree, then I help others. I've been helping people with grief for over 25 years, and along the way, like everybody else, everyone says you got to go to particularly if you grow up in certain background of family. They said, well, when you grow up, you either become an engineer, a lawyer, or a doctor. And so I said, even though my heart calling is actually to help people with grief, and because to me, being able to recover from grief is about life. It is
Yes.
about love. It is about to be able to live again fully with freedom and joy, and it's about hope. But because I do want to listen to my family, I decided, well, might as well just become a doctor too, alongside that. And therefore, I become a veterinarian, and I love. I think probably because of the grief part of it. In now looking back in the strangest way, I love doing emergency. I'm quick on my feet, so to say. So I did emergency actually as veterinarian for quite a few years. And then from there, many people say, oh my, you go from the dark to the darker. From emergency, I went to oncology. I become a board certified
Wow. Wow.
oncologist. And all along, all I do is, yes, I help the pet, but what connect me and called me the most is to be able to be there for the pet parents, to be able to be there for the client, to be able to be there for people who are going through things. In emergency, it's an acute grief. In a in the oncology, it's an anticipatory and a more prolonged type of grief. And then I did that part as well, and I finally say my journey in medicine, in clinical medicine, is complete, and back to full-time grief. So
Wow.
long answer for your questions.
No, no, I love that. And I want to circle back around because you said something interesting. You started experiencing grief at the age of 5.
Yeah, 5 or 4, kind of hard to remember exactly.
I mean, wow. I understand because I think a lot of us that has gotten to this work, it was that early age that actually started it. And throughout that journey, because we all talk about the stages of grief, right? And for those of us that do know, or for those of us those that don't know, there's more than 5 stages of grief, right? There's definitely more than 5 stages of grief. And but the 5 stages of grief was a foundation, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
So from the age that you started experiencing grief until you started realizing what it was and started the healing process, how long did that take? And some of the things that you went through, because I know we talked about mental health, right? We talked about a whole lot of things on the panel. If you guys haven't looked at the panel yet, go back. Dr. Birgitte was there, and we had an amazing conversation, man. She's very intelligent. If you guys haven't realized yet, and her work just shows. So, yeah. What were some of the things? I mean, because at the age of 4 and 5, you can't really process those emotions effectively.
I would say it's probably in the I think the moment I got to college, or maybe even before that, I can't really pinpoint a time, but I start to say, you know what? And in a strange way, I experience all these things, but also I live a very sheltered life. So it's kind of like a paradox. It's like one of those things. And this is why some people say, oh, people doing this and people doing that. And you never know about from the outside. If you look at my life when I was growing up, particularly when I was 5 or 10 or 15, it looks like a perfect life. I'm the only child of an affluent family, and and A+ students, all these good things. With all those, I managed to pull it together and look like this, like a life that everybody say, I want that kind of life.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You wonder what you see. So and I'm not quite sure when I really realize. I mean, the pains is there all along, but I'm not quite sure when I really start saying, I need to look a little more, and I need to be able to help. And I would say it's probably in the late teens, early 20s, probably when I got to college or something, when I said, you know what, there is a different way of this. There's a different way of this. There's a different way of living, and so.
Okay. Now, see, that makes perfect sense because I was and I can only speak from my experience. When I finally realized what was going on with me, I was already in my 40s. As a matter of fact, it was I was in my early 40s, and being a male, I didn't really understand what I was going through. But I traced it. Once I traced it, and this is the reason why I asked, once I traced back to where that pain first started and the different versions of myself I had to become in order to survive this life. I started putting all these multiple things together, and I was like, not only was I surviving um, the initial start of it, but it was the accumulation over the years, and I didn't know nothing about mental health either, right? No one ever taught me about mental health. No one ever taught me about grief or anything like that. And so, I learned from developing a relationship with my losses. And that's how we get into this work, right? Because we don't want other people to suffer the way that we did. And
Yeah.
so we figure out ways to help them, to keep them from going through the same things that we've gone through, from that lived experience. And so throughout the process of those years leading up, oh man, I was angry. I became quiet. I was very, so the basic things. I was angry. I was quiet. I was isolated. But I was able to put on a smile, right? You know what I'm saying? Pretend like there was nothing going on with me, because that's the way I was taught, like you have to man up, pull up your bootstraps, keep it moving, right? So, and then no one ever knew what was going on with me, even the times when I was homeless out there on the streets, um, and life was just handing me my butt left and right, dragging me through the mud and all kinds of things. Mentally, I can say now that I wasn't okay. I was not okay. I mean, I played the victim. Oh my God, I must have did something. Why is this life doing this to me? And this that I was the victim, right? And then I became the villain. Oh, if I got to go through this, then I want you to experience what I'm going through. I don't see why I have to go through this. Right? Yeah, we can see, we look back on it because it's true, right? It's like, no, man, I want you to experience this pain that I'm going through. So we tend to do stupid things, right? Not my fair share of stupid stuff. But it was the process, it was the journey of learning, allowing myself to receive what it was giving me, and then developing such a relationship with my grief. It became it. I used to say it was my dark passenger. It was my reason. It was my excuse for doing things to people, right? So not so good things. But then it became my mentor,
Mhm.
and it began to teach me certain things, and that's how I learned about mental health. Um, and I didn't realize how much I didn't know. I really didn't. So that was the reason why I asked you that question, because it was like, man, was I the only one experiencing that? And I know there's people probably listening right now. Yeah.
I would say everybody's responds differently, and turning into anger. We know now, as I think you mentioned this before, male. Even though some people say grief is grief, everybody experience grief the same way. It's everybody express grief differently. And
Yes.
men and women express grief in many cases. This is a little bit of a generalization, but in general, gentlemen and women, and even different age, a little bit to your, a little bit of like experience, teenagers and children express
Mhm.
grief a little differently. And I would say, the being an expressing it in anger. Now, firstly, being an emergency, when I was in clinic as an emergency clinician, and also as an oncologist and working with grief, I find it interesting that most people, you might have noticed this, most people think about grief, they think about sadness. Oh, if you're not sad, you're not grieving.
Right. Right. Yes. Yeah.
So far from the truth, because a lot of people that come and grieving in so many different cases, particularly in the clinic, that grief expressed as anger, just like with yourself. And
Hmm.
probably there's an underlying sadness in there, but the one that people express is the anger part. But I would say everybody different. I was more of the I was more, and this is how there's really for our audience, there's really no correct or incorrect way to feel and navigate and express and move through and beyond your grief. Because Tony's the one way. I was more in the again. I turn in and I hold everything in and I try to be strong and to be brave, and this is why everybody, when they say I'm going to be strong, I'm like, it's going to get you somewhere that you don't want. I've done that.
Yes, I'm a prime example. I know, right?
Like, well, it's gonna get you going for now, but honey, you don't want to be doing that. It's gotten me into the side of railroad tracks and all kind of things, and so that is everybody's different. I was more turned in, and then I kind of like, and then the other part is numbing. And anybody ever
Yes.
it's like I'm just gonna be strong. I'm gonna try to numb it out, and I was a master in that for some time.
Oh man, that numbness, I got pretty good at doing that too. But I found as I started getting older, and experienced my worst loss, I was able to go to that place where I didn't feel anything.
Yeah, yeah,
Now, the downside to that was when I went to that place where I didn't feel anything, is where I became the most mischievous.
yeah,
I became
yeah,
very mischievous because I was like, I don't feel. I'm not feeling there. I'm empty. I don't feel anything. So, that's when I was like, you know what? I'm done. I don't want to do it no more. And I did, just like how you said, I found myself in a really bad situation, especially being in that really dark place and being numb. And then I realized that it changed on me. It would switch on me. Like I would go a month and not feel nothing at all, just straight emptiness. And I couldn't tell you what I did. I could not tell you what I did, but I could tell you that the thoughts that I had during that time
yeah,
was very, very dangerous, not towards other people, but dangerous towards myself. Because that's when, in that dark place and I'm numb, I was telling myself, what's the purpose of this? What's the purpose of this life anymore? Why am I wasting my time trying to figure it out, trying to be something when this life is not gonna, it's just keeps taking things away from me. And we all know where that ends up, right? It ends up, especially for a lot of people, a lot of men in general, because just like yourself, I specialize with working with men. And when it comes down to it, we get told to man up, we get told that our feelings aren't valid, or we just feel as if no one cares or anything like that. Well, we tend to try to remove ourselves from situations and from around people. And and I'm just out there experiencing it. I can now see the telltale signs when I talk to other men. I watch their actions, I watch the way that they speak, I watch the people that they hang around with. I watch everything because, for one, I want to be aware so I know how to approach you.
yeah.
And even with women, I've seen, everybody's different. I've seen women react to it in different ways.
Mhm.
The decisions that we make, and it's almost clear cut across the board if you know what you're looking for, right? But you can't necessarily come out and tell a person, hey, um, you're not okay right now, because we're in a sense of denial, right? No, you got to, understand I'm okay. But the foods that we eat, right? Um, the things that we watch on TV, we tend to watch a lot more aggressive things on TV because it's a way of, trying to rationalize certain things in our psyche, right?
Mhm.
And so, and that's when I realized that, when I first started learning about grief, I learned about the 5 stages of grief. And then it dawned on me, I am reading the 5 stages of grief according to cancer patients,
Yeah,
not people who were grieving the loss of someone, but people who were dying of a terminal illness. Now, it's
yeah,
a great foundation.
yeah, exactly. And for and that is something many people do miss. And I have many times people come in and say, and this is after somebody passed, you know what, I'm not fitting in the 5 stages. And I was, like you say, Tony, it's like it's initially created and designed for people who are facing terminal illness. And
Right.
so, like I said, if the grief already happened, I mean, nowadays we know that even people who are facing terminal illness, they don't always follow the step by step. And some
Right.
people spin around and jump around and things like that. But yeah, it's definitely everybody is different and unique. And if you don't fit in certain stages, don't feel like something wrong with you because
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I think you might have experienced people who come this like, oh, and they're grieving and then they feel bad about themselves for grieving or for
Oh
not
God.
doing it
Yes.
or something. Yeah, but that's very true. The 5 stages is definitely it's it's a good guidelines. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean you have to fit in the mold all the time.
Yeah, because you never know what's going to pop up, right? And like when you can use the 5 stages as a foundation, you realize that there's so many things that fit in between it and up on and then around those 5 stages. So my anger was associated with severe sadness, severe depression. It was isolation for the most part. That was just I mean, honestly, my isolation was so bad. I didn't want to be around anyone. I think I was telling someone, I said, when I was isolated, I had made my mind up that I was going to go deep into the mountains, find myself a cave, and that's where I was going to be at for the rest of my life till I passed away. Like I didn't want nothing to do with anyone. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to be around anyone. Like I wasn't a people person whatsoever. I really wasn't, and I was just like, how is this possible? What else am I supposed to do, right? And I think that's what the thing was. And then I mean, there was 2 years where I don't remember anything. So brief brain fog, right? Grief brain is what we like to call it. I couldn't
Yeah.
tell you what I did. I, could, I couldn't tell you what I did. I know I had a routine. I went to work. I came home. I locked myself in the house. I had my gym in my garage, so I didn't have to go anywhere. So I worked out in my garage, and then I would come out. I would watch a little TV show, eat, and take a shower, go to bed, and it was like that for 2 years. And I drove trash truck for those 2 years, and I couldn't tell you what I did. But people tell me about conversations I had with them, but I can't remember it. I was like, oh my God. So I couldn't tell you what I did on those days. It was just like, this is where I'm doing. And I was just gone, and I was just running. And I don't know how I made it. I really don't understand how I made it. And I know that there's other people out there that have experienced the same things. And I've talked to multiple people and asked them, they all tell me the same thing. Like, yeah, I went through a stage where I don't remember what I did. And so I always tell them, you remember what you did, your brain just chose to block it out because you're dealing with extreme trauma.
Mhm.
You're dealing with trauma, and your brain is telling you, no, we don't want to remember this because it causes us a lot of discomfort,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Exactly.
And we both know that grief is one of those things that's very, very fickle, and it's tricky. Grief is very tricky, depending on the relationships that you've had with the people that you've lost and everything. I would say good morning to Chai. Hey, Prativa, how you doing this morning? Thank you for tuning in. And yes, we're here. We made it. So yeah. So let's dive into that a little bit. The grief brain fog that happens, and what do you think it comes from?
Well, nowadays, Tony, it's actually shown that many times the people who has experienced grief has this brain fog and kind of like, why is that? Nowadays, we actually know that yes, it's the trauma, it's all these things. It's just whether it's grief or trauma, or like if you have an earthquake, you you kind of like get all confused. I mean, even if you you have the earthquake hit in certain location. I mean, if it's something happened, you kind of like being jarred, and so one part is the trauma itself.
Mhm.
But in the form of grief nowadays, and trauma can cause grief. So, there is many different definitions approach of grief. One approach with the grief, one of the thing the Grief Recovery Institute says is grief is the unsettling feelings caused by any loss,
Mm. Yes.
change. So a trauma is a drastic change or hope unmet, right? And so trauma can cause grief. But nowadays we know that when somebody is grieving, when there is an impactful trauma, impactful stress, loss, or anything in that aspect, or it's a prolonged grief, or perhaps hope unmet, anticipatory grief, it actually causes physical changes as well.
Right.
It causes physical changes in us. It causes a lot of very significant level of inflammation. Let me ask you here, if you or anybody who have the experience of, let's say you got a stomach flu.
Mm. Yes.
It's not has anything to do with your head, but you have a stomach flu or something, and you're just uncomfortable, and you also feel this brain fog. You're kind of like, okay, my stomach hurt and I can't think. Anybody, have you ever known anybody with that experience, or maybe yourself?
Yeah, I've experienced that personally.
Right. And so in that scenario, it's the same thing. What hurting is your stomach, but your mind is also like, I can't think about a single thing. And it's in the similar manner. That's the same process. Part, or at least part of the major contribution of
Mm.
grief and the brain fog is it's the impactful physical impact. Grief causes a lot of inflammation and a lot of changes physically in our body. In
Yes.
the We know this in the early stage. In the early stage, we even know uh, that grief is so impactful that it can change the shape of our heart.
Right.
There are the fancy term Takusubo cardiomyopathy, where your heart's normal heart usually is a Valentine shaped heart. That's normal human and animal's heart. But in Takusubo cardiomyopathy, the heart is actually bellow out on the bottom. So it looked like a bell bottom jar, or like more like a prolonged face or something like that, instead of the normal heart. I mean, can you imagine for something to be that impactful? No wonder it can cause us to be brain fog. And we know that in the chronic inflammation, in the prolonged grief, the inflammations continue, and that's why we see any. You might have here, and you might have experienced this as well, Tony, where you have something happen, and then the next thing is you catch a cold, and then you catch once you get over that, you catch a migraine, and then once you get over that, you catch a flu, and then if people like, oh my god, you can't get a break, you have a loss, and then you got this, and you got this, and you got this, you got this physically as well, and then you get an accident, and then you all these things. But it's a whole thing. But back to the brain fog, it causes that physical changes in the chronic or a prolonged state. When the
Yeah.
grief, we don't recover from the grief, it causes immune system. It causes, we know, blood pressure problem, heart conditions, even internal condition. And then because of the inflammations continuing, you're continuing to get brain fog. I had a client, she thankfully recovered well, that who almost burned her house.
Oh no.
She was grieving. She was grieving the loss of her parents for. It was a loss of her parents, and then it's a loss of somebody else for over 2 years or something, over 3 years. And she's kind of like you say, putting the best we could, and keep pushing and keep pushing. But she was, her brain fog is such a way. Every time she cook, every time she has a quiet moment, her heart, when she's busy, she can keep her mind running, right? And then
Right.
shut down your heart. But anytime she has a quiet moment, including when she's cooking, she's in front of the stove and looking at the thing, the heart all scream, and then she just like lost in space, and all she could feel is the pain, and then she's not paying attention to the stove, and one day to the point it catch on fire, almost burn her house, and that's when she's like, I really need. I've been getting help. It's not working. I really need to do something else to give me a try. So, and thankfully, Cecil and her family is all good. But yeah, it's talking about brain fog. It can be sometimes we're like, oh well, a little bit of brain fog, so how bad it can go. It can get dangerous. Like you said, you were driving. I mean, if you have a brain fog and you just kind of like out of it completely, that can cause accidents. If you are at home, I mean, even this person is a stay-at-home mom, and she's like, whatever, I'm stay-at-home mom. I don't work. I don't drive except around the neighborhood and what have you. Almost burn her house. So yeah,
And it
one thing
shows up.
else,
Yeah, it definitely it shows up, and I can definitely understand that because I remember, like I said, I worked out all the time. I was in bodybuilding at the time, and that was like my outlet, but it was also my addiction. So I've never been into drugs or anything like that, and so working out was my addiction. I know it sounds strange, but there's a healthy way to work out, and then there's a very unhealthy way to work out. And
yeah,
during that time, I mean, I was always known for pushing myself. And I just remember one time I was working out, and I told myself, I said, you know what? I don't- there's nobody here. I'm gonna go ahead and hurt myself, and hopefully this will be it. So I
yeah,
just remember I put just over 560 pounds on my bench press bar.
wow,
And I thought to myself, like, if it doesn't come up, I am okay with this. And I picked it up and I put it down and I put it up again and it started weighing down and I did not care. Right. My mind had went somewhere else. And next thing you know, it's laying like on this part of my neck. And my first thought was, roll it on your neck. Just roll it on your neck. There's no one that can stop you. But then there's something else. I came to I had a clear sense, a brief moment, and something said, pick it up, get it off of you. And I ended up picking it up and putting it off me. And I got up and I walked out of the garage and I sat there for a minute and I thought, and I was like, man, that's dangerous because I didn't even know I was doing that. And then, like you said, driving, what if I would have got into an accident? But if you ask people that I was with, they'll tell you that I was very aware.
hmm
I still couldn't tell you. I was just like, all right, well, I don't remember any of this. But the biggest challenge was during the process, when I realized what the healing process was,
yeah,
and I started taking the path of starting to develop those tools to heal. I realized that was the hardest thing I've ever done because then I realized that the grief that I was experiencing was a symptom of everything else, like unresolved grief, right? Things that are still trapped inside of me. And it was just like, what do I do now? My eating habits wasn't the greatest at that moment. I was constantly, eating junk food, drinking sodas, and so I deterred away from the diet.
you, you didn't care whether you live or die, so why would you be happy, right? So
Well, I took this life so personal. It was so personal to me because I remember having a conversation with Prativa, and I told her, I said, it felt as if I was in a fight that I didn't even know I was a part of. And it whooped me so bad. It whooped me so bad. I was like, oh my God. Because it made me reflect on my life
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, and everything that I had experienced leading up to the loss of my son, and then the loss followed by my mother. And I thought, honestly, I thought God hated me. I'm not a very religious individual. I do believe in a creator, but I was just like, wow, what did I do to you? I didn't do anything to you. Why would you do this to me? Right? I'm not doing anything. I haven't been in trouble in a long time. I don't do the things I used to do. I've turned my life around. Oh, this is personal. I was like, do you not like me that much? That this is what you have to do on a daily basis to try to break me or hurt me or anything like that. And in that time where I was being a victim, it dawned on me the word broken. And I changed that word to hurt. I said, I thought about it. I said, I'm a human being. You can't really break a human being. You can break bones, you can break toys, but you cannot break a human being. What you can do is that you can hurt an individual extremely bad or extremely deep. And when I changed that word, that's where I realized that the path of healing started to present itself. And it was little things like that I had put together that helped along the way, changing simple words. And then from there, it was like a step. It was like a step. You go up, you go down, you go up, you go round and round, all kinds of things.
Yeah, it definitely it's and I love how you put that. It's sometimes it's like, oh, well, we see it as we're broken,
Right.
and then sometimes we see it as things happening to us, and depend on how you see it. And
Mhm.
and definitely it's where it can be a very painful thing, and sometimes people who has a prolonged grief, and we've been running from it, and we've been numbing ourselves, and all doing all these things, as you say, Tony, when you actually sit down and say, I got to do something about this. A lot of my clients say, dang, this hurts more than I was a month ago.
Oh, yeah.
Can't remember who says that. Said, you got to face it to heal it. You got
Yes.
to face it. You can't keep running, yeah, you can keep running, but it's not going to leave you. It's part of you. You got to face it to heal it.
Right.
And no, we're not broken. We are, like you said, we're hurt. Your heart might be broken, yeah, metaphorically, and in some cases it's almost physically, but yet, like you said, it's hurt. And then when you kind of like see it, I love how you put that. When you see it that you've been hurt, then you can say, okay, then let me see what I can do to alleviate the pain. Let
Right.
me see what I can do to stop the pain. And many times you might notice that you have been changed as well, and sometimes people are so concerned about change, but the truth is, if we look at everything in life, everything's changed all the time. And actually, biologic wise, you're not the same person as you are yesterday, because your cells changed, right? Otherwise, we will look exactly the same when we were 20. So,
You know what? Not really has changed since I was in my 20s. No, well, a little things have changed. Like now I have no hair and I do have a beard, right? But it's crazy enough. I saw some pictures of myself, and I compared it to the pictures that I have now. And that's about the only thing that changed. I look primarily almost the same. And I tell people, I was like, I'm almost 50 years old, man. They look and go, what? I go, yeah, I'm almost 50 years old. It's like, but you have no wrinkles. I was like, oh my God, here we go. I was like, I age differently. That's all. But I couldn't tell you why. I just couldn't tell you why. And and your client was absolutely right. And you're absolutely right. The healing process, I mean, honestly, I think this is why a lot of people give up. It hurts a lot more than the actual grief does.
Yeah,
It
or it
definitely.
can be, depend on what's going on. Some people who are still reeling in pain, you might not. But in some scenario, particularly for prolonged grief, that you become masterful on numbing and running, then sitting there looking at it, and it's I use the analogy, maybe because of my backup background. I use the analogy of like it's like a broken bone. If somebody were to break their legs, and instead of having it address and manage and treat it correctly from the get-go, imagine if your heart is like your a bone, you break your leg, and then Tony, how it's like everybody say, oh, get busy. Be really, really busy now, or give it time, or both, right? Give it time and get busy in the meantime. Imagine if you break your legs and then you start running, and
That's not going to work out too well.
for 2 years.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Can you
That,
imagine? And even if somehow you're able to develop calluses around the broken part, this is just from all the many patients I've seen. Even if you are able in a broken bone, even if you're able to so-called heal it, and this is why it helps people to understand. It's like even if you're so able to so-called allow it to fuse back together, but if you didn't take care of it correctly in the first place, then you heal with all these callus. Some people know of somebody in their life who has a broken bone, and then it didn't heal correctly and has all these calluses. It
yes, yes.
hurts the leg, but it's also because then now you start, if your leg hurt, you're gonna start shifting your posture and all these things. Even when you know it, it's to have hurt your whole musculoskeletal system. If you were to treat that leg that is now full of callus and affecting the whole body, what
Right.
happened is, and then it's not even something that surgeons like doing, but if they need to, they'll do it, where they need to sometimes they need to re-break the whole thing. They need to go back in, clean up the callus, which is hurt, it's painful. And then, in some scenario, they need to re-break and realign the whole thing. And those things hurt like nobody
It
business.
does. It
But the
does.
good news is, the great news is, this is the thing. Even if it hurt you, if it is painful, when you do that with proper guidance, with the correct person, very soon you feel so much better. This is why I said at the beginning, grief is about hope and being able to live again with freedom from pain, and being able to be able to thrive, to truly thrive.
Right. No, I agree with what you said right there, and you hit the nail on the head. And again, I'm only speaking from my own personal experience because going backwards and understanding, I had to re-break, you know, I had to re-break myself
Yeah.
because I realized I wasn't all the way there. And it was a reset, like all of these things that I had experienced, I had to re-experience them again, but just in a different way. I re-experienced them in a way to where it became a profound teacher, right?
Yeah.
It became raw. It became just this raw information that either I was going to accept and grow from, or I was going to accept and linger in. And so once I broke it again, it gave myself time to come back together, or start to put myself together again, just in a different way. Now, you mentioned something earlier that I want to dive into, and I'm going to ask you to give a definition of it. Now, you mentioned acute grief earlier, and which is, if you guys haven't noticed, this is another form of grief. For you guys who don't know what acute grief is, I'm going to have Dr. Birgitte give you guys a definition, and then we're going to dive into giving you guys examples. So just in case if you're unfamiliar with it and, you know what I'm saying, or not aware that you may be experiencing it, maybe you guys can, you know what I'm saying, write it down and kind of come up with some tools and some a game plan of moving forward in this. So give the audience a definition of acute grief.
I probably honestly mixing up medical terms, right? But acute is something that is recent or sudden.
Right.
And so, in other words, for instance, this is an example of it. You are going along just fine, and you think your work is you're working at a company. You think everything's smooth and good, and then the next thing is they call you to the office and say, well, you know what? Actually, the company's been having problem, and yeah, sorry, but this Friday is your last day. That will be, and it could be a sudden loss as well, a sudden loss where somebody is seemingly fine, perhaps a family member. Yes, they might be even younger than you, and then an accident happened or something happened, and the person passed. That is a sudden loss. It's an acute grief that just happened like that, and you experiencing, and then it's recent. So but when people come to me and it's something that just happened last week or 2 weeks ago or 2 days ago, that's something that it's a sudden or what I call it acute, where they just happening, and it's very recent, versus the prolong or when I'm mixing up the term, I said chronic, which is people has been, you have a loss or something happened 2 years ago or perhaps 20 years ago.
Yes.
And you've been spinning in it. You've been going on and like Tony said, sometimes we have different kind of survival mechanisms to say, oh, I'm gonna run from it, or I'm gonna turn numb, or I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, and but at the same time you've been in it, just like people with chronic illness where they have perhaps whether it's an infection or some other conditions that've been going on and on, Lyme disease that's been going on for years and years and years.
Yes.
So I mentioned also briefly anticipatory grief. Anticipatory grief is usually by nature prolonged, but that is something when somebody, something is either something is going on or something is going to happen. So for instance, I work with people with dementia group as well, and that is such a good example of chronic and even anticipatory grief. Or let's say your loved ones or your friend get cancer. Well, you start grieving the moment that you receive that news of the dementia or the cancer. Now the person might not pass for another many months or even years, but you starting that day. I work with parents, a lot of parents for whose children facing terminal illness, cancer in particular, and they might be like, oh yeah, we did this and we did that, and then right now the person's just happy out there and having fun in Disneyland or partying somewhere, but there is an underlying these things of like, well, we know this is not gonna last forever. There is always deep surprises, always miracle, but for most people, it's like, okay, we're counting the days, and that is actually a very tough thing to do.
It really is, yes. And I love that you brought that up because, prolonged grief, I realized that I've experienced that. I didn't even know what it was at first, right? Because the old memories come up of incidents. And I used to go, man, why is this popping up? That's in my past. Why? But then I realized that every time something from my past popped up, it was something that I needed to deal with. It's something that I had to go back and heal from. So I used it, and I don't suggest people do this. It's definitely It's definitely a more complicated road to go back and heal those things, but it's necessary. So, I like I tell everyone, this is for educational purposes only. The things that you hear us talk about are the things that we've experienced, and the tools that we do share can be used in your toolbox. But please, if you guys are struggling and not understanding what you can find support, please, talk to a counselor, go see a therapist, go get yourself in a support group in an area, and be able to surround yourself with people that have experienced similar things. That way you can learn from them. So
Yeah.
by no means are we telling you this, go out and do this. We're just we're sharing our journeys and the things that we've used. So the tools used, but go find somebody to talk to help you figure it out. Because as Dr. Brigitte said, grief is such an individual fickle thing. That it changes and everybody does it differently. You have to find what works for you. By all means, find what works for you in a healthy way, and then take those necessary steps for you
Yeah,
that you
yeah.
need to
And I love that. I always say this. It's I use the analogy. Sometimes it's kind of strange, Tony, when people have a physical thing.
do.
Most people are quick to go to the doctor. Like if you get a broken leg, you like, dang, I got to go to the doctor like 5 minutes ago, right?
Right, right,
And then let me go find an orthopedic specialist, ideally an hour ago, or I'm already there, and things like that. But when it's in term of emotional and mental health, particularly emotional, many times we're like, oh, I'm gonna see if I can move through this and I can power through this and all, or if
yes,
I can fix it myself. If I can fix
right,
it myself, I'm gonna give a try, and I'm gonna listen here and there. I'm gonna listen to Tony, and then he mentioned something, and then I'm gonna get adventurous and try different things. Firstly, now you know that the physical, even the emotional thing, grief in particular, has significant physical impact that most people don't know, and you might be experiencing it and you don't realize it's come from grief. And
right.
unfortunately, many physicians are still yet to be more educated about it. But also, I use the analogy of a surgeons. Just think about this: even the best orthopedic surgeons cannot fix his or her own broken leg.
Mm. Oh man, that's deep. That's so deep right there, because it is so true. It's so true. You cannot fix your unbroken life. I love that right there. That just has so many deep meanings when you unpack it, right? And hopefully you guys caught on to what she said. You know, even those of us that have experienced, we cannot fix our unbroken life. So take with that what you will, unpack it, and find your definition on it. But realize what she just said. Man, that was deep. That was very, very deep. So now, moving forward in your life, you became an oncologist, um, and you still kind of tied everything in when you became an oncologist, or did you
I
primarily?
So I continue to work with grief during my time in clinic as a doctor. I actually no longer in clinic. I don't work as a doctor anymore. I finally go back to what called me in the first place to start with, is what I say. It's I serve my time in clinic, and now I am full time grief specialist coach.
Okay, okay. See, I love that right there. I love that right there. But you also became a veterinarian.
Yes, yeah, it's that's a, the oncology and emergencies in veterinary field. So I was a board certified veterinarian oncologist.
Okay. Now, with that's just interesting. That's definitely interesting. So, when in your field of work, do you work with both men and women, or primarily, it doesn't matter, or is it primarily women?
I both I work with in grief, I'm talking about grief. Veterinary warranty
Yes,
with
yes, yes.
and the pets, right? But in grief, I work with both men and women, and one of my specialty is I'm able to help anyone with it from any of with any of the 40 different causes of grief. But one things that I'm also known for is for those chronic grief that you try this and you try that and you try this and then you keep
Right. Yeah.
seemingly spinning around, and many people has been through the journey of therapy, counseling, mindset coaching, and sometimes even different substances, so to say. And please don't take me wrong. There is a place for therapy, and it's I think it's all help in your healing. And
Mhm.
then it's it's one of those things where I probably why about 20% my client are therapists, and but I work a lot with that's my specialty is the chronic grief where you like I've been this been going on and on and on and so it's from the tool I learned over the last 30 years and created a what I call a multi-dimensional approach where it'll help you release your grief from your heart, from your mind, but also from your body because grief does get cellularized.
Yes. Oh my God, I love that right there. I definitely love that. Um, just that whole statement right there. It just made me start thinking like, oh man, that's deep. Again, another deep statement by you and everything. So as we start to wrap up, I always ask the guests if you um, had something that you can give the audience in words, what would you tell them?
It's something I give to audience in words. I would say that as painful as painful as it seems, being experiencing grief comes from love. If you don't love, if you never love anything or anybody, including yourself, you will not grieve. In
Mhm.
other words, let's say somebody you know passed away, you might feel bad, but you don't necessarily grieve deeply. So grief is about love, and so is recovering from grief is about
Yes.
love. It's about hope. It's about being able to live your life fully again with even more ease, with even more joy, and with just even more freedom now, because now you've experienced it and then you're able to take it and allow it to bring the next versions of you. So hang in there, have hopes, and know that there is help. When there is hope, there is help. And when you allow help, there is hope for being able to release the hurt,
Right.
release the pain.
Yes. Yes. Now, where can people find you?
Thank you. People can find me in multiple way. Firstly, you can email me directly. It's Dr. Tan for grief at gmail.com. It's all one word. DRTAN for FOR grief at gmail.com. But you can also find me on Facebook, Birgitte Pauni Tan. You can find me on Instagram. You can go to my website, joyfulrichesbeyondgrief.com. And so
Mhm.
those are a few different ways to find me. But
I love
anyone who
that.
is listening to this, welcome to email me and ask me any question.
Do me a favor before we pop off. Pop all your information into the chat so people can see it and they know where you are. Also, I'm going to be putting that information in the description, so you guys have that there as well. So you guys, man, Dr. Brigitte, thank you for being on today.
Yeah,
Thank you for just sharing your journey and your knowledge. Such an amazing journey and such an amazing person. I want to thank you for everything. Thank you just being here. And for all of you that are tuning in today, her information is going to be all down on the bottom. And as always, feel free to reach out to her and make sure you guys are getting the necessary support that you need. And thank you for tuning in. Thank you guys for just being a part of what we got going on. Thank you for supporting the channel. If you made it this far and you're looking from another channel, head over to the YouTube channel and give us a sub, leave us a comment, share, let us know what you guys think about it. And as always, I am Tony Lynch. I'm your host, and I appreciate you guys for allowing us to do this and supporting us. So until next time, you guys keep your head up. Peace.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tony.